PHB shortage, how the 9% tax credits are going to be absorbed and given to those who didn't have enough money to get their that has been selected as a leave and 4%, but there is not enough money for that. So 9%. Now, how is that gonna affect our deals? Because farm worker tax credit needs to go along with 9%. And Lisa, please correct me if I'm wrong. You're the expert on housing development finances. So, but my mind was blowing up yesterday because I say, well, if they give our 9%, lift is not gonna happen. 4% is down, it's competitive. Now 9% is competitive. I am concerned about raising and asking for more money in the agricultural tax credit, because now we are gonna be put in another difficult situation where we are gonna ask for more money for bigger organizations to take away, put a few units of farm worker in their 200 units, put 10 units of farm worker tax credit, and I'm not going to be able to provide the services that we have been providing all this year. More than a question, I don't know if Martin can help us to figure it out this. Can we bring Natasha here and explain how is this going to work? Tax credit, we're gonna get into our pot of money that is dedicated to farm workers. So again, I would like more information about how this is gonna work. And at least I know you were not in the presentation, Natasha's presentation yesterday. I don't know if Martin was there. I didn't see him, but this is something that I will have more understanding because telling you the truth, I'm feeling lately that all we doing here benefit the private sector more than CDCs. And I'm tired of working from private developers without getting anything from them.
Yeah, Martin, I don't know, did you want to jump
I
on that?
was
Okay.
I was not in that meeting. That said, I agree. We definitely need to figure out exactly how this would work and make sure it does not affect your ability to actually provide the housing for ag workers that they need. I know that is not Natasha's intention to make it more difficult for you to do your job, and I will definitely seek out further clarification. I did want to.
Yeah, I want to clarify that I'm not blaming Natasha, not even the institution. I understand you guys are doing the best you can to help to put more units in the ground. But again, I'm going to be calling out and how we do that and who are those organizations putting units on the ground without putting services.
And to that, it's the same kind of thing on the compliance, right? And that we want for the on-farm is, right now, I don't think OHCS has a mechanism to say no to any of those large developers if they go after the ag workforce housing tax credits, because it's very open, which has been really wonderful over the years. However, if people are developing 200 units and putting 15 units to ag workforce housing tax credits just to fill a gap because construction is crazy, they're not really serving that population well, right? And then because they're doing 200 units because they have more money than the smaller nonprofits that focus specifically on this population, their projects are going to get picked over the smaller projects every single time because you got a bigger bang for your buck, supposedly. And you start diminishing or diluting the impact that you're trying to have. Y'all require us to do resident services, but are those folks doing the intensive resident services that FHDC or Hacienda or Bienestar are doing? Or any other organization that has farm worker housing as its own building that they're providing those services to. And so when we're looking at the compliance with on-farm, maybe we need to start looking at what the making it a little bit more difficult to access these resources so that the population is served correctly, not just housed, but this is a really vulnerable population. They don't have a voice. And so, Tim, you're asking, how are we going to get these people to speak up? Well, hell, that's like asking them to stand in front of a firing line. We can't be putting this responsibility on the tenant. We have to be putting the responsibility on the people building the housing and running it. And if we're not going to do that, then I don't know what we're doing here. Sorry.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that. That is well put, and it's definitely something that we need to consider further. Thank you. Currently, for ag worker housing tax credit only projects, there is not a lot of compliance built around that, simply because there's not a lot of statutory authority to monitor for specific kinds of compliance with that. Basically, the statute only says that the housing has to be set aside specifically for ag workers for 10 years. And as long as that is accomplished, essentially, we have no ability to demand any other action from them. It's something that we would like to fix in the statute so that we actually can do more monitoring. But essentially, that is the main reason why, for the most part, our hands are tied with actually checking up on this housing in a more robust manner.
And that's what we're here for, Martin. We're more than happy to go to the legislature and ask them to change laws and make it so that it's going to work in the way that I think that it was intended to work in the first place.
Well, and I'll just say this, and then I know, Lori, you've been very patient. Again, this work group is that opportunity because, we are going to be pushing legislative or statutory recommendations, right? The complexity for that is obviously there's an election and, the next governor, that may or may not be a priority. They may or may not have the will or the desire to push any kind of reforms like that. But, this is that opportunity to just go straight to it, like you talked about, Lisa, and say, hey, we want to change the statute. So OHCS does have some additional compliance pieces. What compliance are we talking about? So it could be or OSHA, but OHCS does have the ability, right, Martin, to go out onto property and inspect housing, does it not? I thought by statute, if you took our money.
That is a good question. I'm not entirely sure how they would overlap, but yes, we do put into the reservation letter, for instance, that they do need to make sure that they're open to inspections and that we can drop by as needed without warning. We do not currently have the staff to do that on the level of on farm housing, because it's usually just one manufactured dwelling on a field that they own. That is definitely something that we need to consider. To Sarah's point, whenever we put ag worker housing tax credit into a on-farm project that is a labor camp, we always make sure that they present a letter from you that says they're in compliance with your regulations.
Awesome. All right, Lori.
I'll try to be quick. I guess I kind of have four things I wanted to say. One is that I do think that when you're talking about funding growers to make capital improvements, it's not just compliance with OSHA. In addition to that, there's, in regards to compliance with how or if rent is charged, in regards to access, people serving farm workers have access to that housing. The other piece of it is connected with kind of what are the criteria that growers would be expected to meet to, request and receive funding. And we've talked about that, about, what's the prioritization? How do you decide which projects get funded? And it seems like one question is whether or not you're going to tie that to what does this task force decide are some of the key goals that they want to achieve? And it seems like some of the things that have been mentioned, right, is for on-farm farming, for on-farm housing is kitchens, whether they need to be enclosed, whether sinks are provided. In regards to the electrical system, can it support air conditioning? Can it support just the increased electrical need? Can it support air purifiers? And then the other, piece that has mentioned is distance between housing and orchards in regards to distance from pesticide application. And then obviously you've already mentioned the water issue, just in terms of having safe water, having enough water, and having it delivered with sufficient pressure. So the other thing that I would mention is that in addition to kind of meeting programmatic goals, is that there could be, right, just how many workers are you serving, and which workers are you serving, right? Is it housing that will be built so that families have access to it, right? Because Oregon's fair housing laws require that the on-farm housing also be available for families. So I think those things need to be considered, not just in the kind of the what and the how, but the, how are you going to decide who has priority? And I would just say that in regards to funding options, like I think, there's some consideration of whether or not you're going to increase the tax credit. And I would like to hear, I'd like to hear from Lisa and Meg about what their opinions are about the positives and negatives of the existing kind of tax credit system. And I don't know, I think now that the timeline has been moved back for community-based projects. They have to wait till September to kind of see if there's unused funds. And I'm not sure if that timeline works with the other kind of funding streams. So I think, this group has facilitated that conversation of making sure that the farm worker tax credits work well with the other funding streams. And maybe that's what Meg's talking about. And I think that specific conversation needs to happen. And I don't know if there's other funding that is being considered. I don't know, in the past, my understanding, right, there was a set aside for farm worker funding. I think, OHCS has other funding mechanisms, and I don't know whether those are being considered for both on-farm and for the community-based housing. And then my last point is just, I think it is critical that, at this point, that we consider, I mean, this has been said, but that we consider that part of the funding is designated for community-based housing for migrant workers. And that's something we've talked about in this group a lot, about how that could be done. And so maybe this is the time to actually make it happen. And it seems like Jackson County and it seems like the Dales would be, particularly areas that you might have both, you have a high need, a high number of migrant workers. And it seemed like some, grower support for that.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. So yeah, I think as far as how we would fund it or what buckets are going to get money, that's kind of the topic of discussion, especially for the next meeting we have, right? This is not like the sort of task force where I've secretly met with Lou Savage and I'm like, I've laid out the next 20 steps we need to take as a task force, and here's what we're going to do for funding, and here's the buckets it's going to go into, and I'm going to try and go, get the buy-in from all these groups. This is very much, kind of open to discussion. Like the main meeting around this will probably be multiple meetings, and it's not happened yet. So, we could say, hey, let's create a separate, entirely separate bucket of funds just for on-farm that has some increased compliance pieces tied to it. Maybe we make an agency request for 4 compliance officers for OHCS, right? And that's tied to this bucket, and it goes for at least a biennium, right? Or whatever kind of recommendations. We could say, let's triple the ag worker housing tax credit and allow the monetization of it, right? With, again, increased compliance or with a request for additional OSHA inspectors. Like it's very much kind of out there. So, I think the more kind of specific input or ideas you all have, that's like tangible. That's like going to be good and help push it within this task force. Sarah, you look like you're ready to Say something. Okay. You were looking at me like I was saying something dumb, and you're like, Tim, I'm about to come off mute and
What
correct
is
you.
with my facial expressions? Nope, I'm just listening. Thank you though for the opportunity.
Okay. So yeah, I don't know. I guess I'll put this question to you, Sarah. Is OSHA as part of this task force having, I don't think it's been kind of explicitly discussed, but are there internal discussions at this point about increased compliance or the need for more compliance officers? Or like the kind of the discussion we had around like doing more to protect workers who do come out about this housing
So
now.
I don't know about official conversation, but I have said repeatedly in the 6 years I've been here that 1 to 2 Spanish speakers per field office is not acceptable. I've been the one. And for me to do my inspections each month and then translate for every other compliance officer who has Spanish speakers, that is a burden I cannot take. And it would not matter. It does matter if you're if Spanish is your first language. It does matter because you can do it quicker with more accuracy, but it doesn't matter. The Spanish speaking compliance officer still is required to get their inspections done. And then because they get a 5% boost in pay, translate for everybody else, somehow magically find the time in 40 hours a week to do that. So boots on the ground will help. I just had this conversation the other day when I said that needs to be like 4 Spanish speakers per office, okay, per field office. And the response back to me was, you know that accidents and fatalities are always going to take precedence. I said, fine, that's valuable in that moment. If there's a fatality and the worker or their family are Spanish speakers, yes, it's going to take precedence over ALH, but greater numbers of agriculturally trained Spanish speaking compliance officers would go a long way to help this. Because we could then respond same day. You know as well as I do that these complaints have to be addressed near immediately, 1 to 2 days. By the time they come to Nargis or to whatever organization, by the time they get there, they've built up such a level of stress and they could be gone in the next week, or the field could be shut down, or the housing site could be closed. Like there's so much movement in this population that OSHA needs to respond. Like we got to get on site same day or within or the next day. And you cannot do that if you don't have more Spanish speaking boots on the ground in our offices.
So I guess my question for you is, how many total people are in these offices, these field offices? I know you said 1 to 2 Spanish speakers. So are there like 5 people and 1 to 2 speak it? Is it?
Nope. It'll be like this. Salem is a small-ish office. Portland is quite large. Even in Portland, I think we had at most 4 Spanish speakers, okay? 3 where Spanish was the primary first language and English was the second, and then me. English is first, Spanish second. But Salem's a great example. Salem probably has 10 to 12 compliance probably has 10 compliance officers right now to speak Spanish, and that's good. When I was in that office 2 years ago, I was the only one. So approximately 2 out of 10. That might sound fine as a percentage, but when you consider the agriculture that is surrounding Salem, a lot of what SFO, Salem Field Office, does is agriculture related. And not to mention forestry. We are seeing growing numbers of Spanish speaking workers in forestry. So of course, construction, of course, manufacturing, of course, these other industries as well. But even in a small office like Salem, I don't think it's acceptable. I am always pushing them, get more. It would just go such a long way to help them respond to those complaints quickly.
So I guess I apologize. I'm kind of monopolizing this meeting with the questions I'm about to ask. So like, is there a special group of these or OSHA compliance people that work explicitly with on-farm, or it's just, hey,
like
we've got
this.
these. Yeah. Okay.
It'd be like this. Sarah comes to Salem Field Office. Sarah speaks Spanish. So she'll focus on agriculture and construction safety wise. There's also health compliance officers. We'll leave those to the side for a moment, okay? So I focus mostly on health and construction because in Salem field office, we get a lot of those and there's lots of Spanish speaking workers there. So every compliance officer just has their area, right? We also have a forestry guy who was a logger for 20 years. He's fantastic. He doesn't speak Spanish, so he'd need to like bring me with him because he's going to go out to a job site where there was an accident and the workers are Spanish speakers. Well, he knows the industry. I know the language. So I would go do that translation for him. So that's how they.
So then I guess it's especially just kind of thinking about this. Do you think it would make sense, or OSHA be willing to kind of push maybe for like a biennium, creating a special group of just farm inspectors to try and get out and do like a huge big push on
Right.
like on farm housing, right? It's like, hey, here's some more money, but we're gonna like
So
drastically increase the number of on farm inspections.
I think that's a valid conversation to have. So right now we have emphasis inspections. So like heat stress has always been an emphasis. And the time I've been at Oregon OSHA, even before the heat rule, heat stress was an emphasis. So what that meant is last summer, in the end of June, we remember the heat dome, we, especially the Spanish speaking workers, get an email and a phone call saying, will you go out this weekend? And what I specifically want you to do is I want you to make sure there is water. I want you to go over the symptoms of heat stress. I want you to review with the workers, what is a 911 emergency when it comes to heat? Everybody will go, oh, we know what heat stress is. Well, what's a 911 emergency? Like, when would you call 911 versus telling the worker to sit down in the shade and drink some water and watch them as they rest? So anyway, so that's what we call an emphasis program. We've always had heat stress emphasis, but there's possibly a conversation for having this kind of, and with those heat stress weekends, we blitz. We just send everybody out who's available, whether it's a Saturday, Sunday, whatever, and you just try and hit the pavement and get a lot of boots on the ground. I do think there's a possibility that we could emphasize housing or housing sites and get more boots on the ground.
Yeah, I think because for me, what I'm thinking about is, if we go out and push, like I know you're going through your rule advisory committee right now. And so if OSHA comes out with, new rules, then OHCS is dispersing all these kind of additional easy access funds, then there should be kind of a simultaneous big push on compliance and inspections to say, hey, are you actually doing what you said you're supposed to be doing? So I think that's something to think about in the wider group or in the actual thing. So I appreciate you kind of allowing me to kind of dig in on that. So okay, so I'm trying to think. I haven't skipped anything. What other kind of, I guess, specifics? I'd like some specifics from people as far as like their thoughts on compliance and funding and how those might work, right? And the reason I asked for specifics is, one, it's easier to go push that or talk about that in the wider Ag Labor Housing Task Force about like specific wants. And it gives us, as both this group and that group, like a starting place, right? Like we get a set that the tone of the conversation is, how do we get the additional compliance? Not, is there additional compliance? It's how do we actually execute that program wise? And that could be, again, we do kind of have this really good opportunity where maybe we have a separate pool for on-farm, but it comes with additional compliance. And then we also make statutory changes to the ag worker housing tax credit to prioritize nonprofit development, right? Or culturally specific development. So like I want some, and if not now, I don't mean to put anyone on the spot like, haha, you've missed your one opportunity to make strong recommendations that I'm going to take somewhere. But I guess I am looking for some of those kind of specifics that you're interested in as far as funding, additional compliance, that kind of stuff. So if you have some of that, I'd love to hear it. I don't know. Yeah, so I don't know.
You're muted. You're muted.
Kim,
Oh, have I been? I
you
haven't
just
been.
cut out halfway.
Oh, okay. I was like, you better not have just let me talk to myself for like a minute. You're like, Tim's on a roll. So, I guess, yeah, I just wanted to open up to like specific funding recommendations, specific compliance recommendations. I know you all were just listening to kind of me, talk to Sarah about some of this and kind of my own kind of specific questions, but, as always with this stuff, the chance of success, the chance of this making whatever kind of final recommendation, legislative compliance, capital investment, it's going to be more successful if all of you kind of are pushing kind of the same issue, right? Or kind of on the same page as far as what you want to accomplish. So yeah, Meg, anyone, especially developers, Rosie, do you have recommendations that you want, right? Very specific funding recommendations, like I said, do you want to monetize the tax credit, right? Do you want to make it exclusive to community-based? Do you want to see I guess I'm looking for some stuff to take. And then I've shared, I think all of you have the information for those task force, right? Meg, you have the link and all that. Okay. So I just recommend, I think, like I said, the next one is going to be capital investments. I highly recommend you all attend. And again, if you don't have specific recommendations now, come with specific recommendations. Whether you're a grower and you want to talk about, I know we've heard from some of the growers and the complexity of the tax credit or staying in compliance. Bring us those ideas. I think we can all acknowledge that if we're in this room, we're here because the current state of things isn't good enough. And there is this opportunity to walk together to find and try and push for solutions that ultimately help all of our ag workers. So yeah.
Tim, when is that meeting? When is that next meeting?
Let me check my calendar. Give me 1 second. Right, I actually don't think it's been scheduled yet. I don't see it through September. So I think, now that I think about it, I think there is a survey I have to do to find next times. But I'm more than happy to email out everyone once I get that hard date. So yeah, that's my apologies. I thought we had it scheduled already. But yeah, Lori.
I was just this is your ask is a good one. It's a really hard one, and it actually feels like I think we need like a very structured conversation about it, and I think it needs to happen soon. And so it seems like maybe if Martin can be there, and it sounds like Meg is asking that Natasha be there, but it just seems like people that are in charge of different, ways of funding at OHCS need to be present, and then to kind of have a very tight agenda where, we kind of hear from the, the nonprofit developers about kind of what's working and not working about different funding streams.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe what we can do, or what I can do, is send out a more kind of developer specific meeting to get, like you said, Martin, Natasha there, to talk about like really programmatic in the weeds. What is like the deployment of this look like? What is the guidelines on this new funding look like? So yeah, I'm more than happy to do that because obviously we don't have anything on the schedule yet. So for the ALH task force, so we probably would be able to meet before that and make some recommendations. And yeah, Meg, please go ahead.
Just reinforcing everything that Lori said. I think it's very difficult for us at this point to give you a recommendation. We don't even know if we are going to get any other kind of funding. And Lisa also, make a good point. And what if the funding goes to those bigger projects? That is a concern, and that's what I'm asking. Not just Natasha, maybe Roberto Franco should be also in this meeting, and Chelsea also. I would call for an extraordinary meeting. I think it's needed. And something that we might rethink about this meeting is that I appreciate the work that we want to, do in regards to the growers, but I would like to kind of like have my time as a nonprofit housing developer. I feel like we talk a lot about the growers, and at some point I feel that I don't have as much power to define what is gonna happen with the growers. Are we gonna give them money? And it feels sometimes that we invest a lot of time in these meetings for growers and not for us, and we are missing I feel this is my own problem. Please don't take it personal. But I feel that we are missing the train here. That if we don't bring Natasha and Martin and Chelsea and Roberto, and we really dedicate time, like Lori say, to understand first what is the impact of the new strategies. And again, the strategy that Natasha was showing yesterday looks like a very good one. I just don't know how it's going to affect our agricultural tax credit and our application. So hopefully this helps.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we can certainly have that discussion. And so, I would say, uh, you know, as far as the timing and split of this, you know, I never want one group to feel like they're being marginalized or their concerns aren't being listened to. Um, so uh, as always, I try and extend this invitation out. If advocates, developers, growers ever want to have further smaller discussions, I'm more than happy to have those conversations with you. Um, if you have specific agenda items you want discussed, I'm more than happy to put them kind of of the table for these. Um, so I think what I'll do then is after this, I'll work with Martin to figure out when he and Natasha are going to be available, and then make sure I give enough time to you all developers to come up with some maybe specific recommendations or kind of questions, and Lisa, um, about uh, uh, kind of what that in the weeds program funding looks like and how it would work in conjunction with any sort of capital investment we might make at the Ag Labor Housing Task Force. Um, you know, the thing I think is important for all of us is to kind of acknowledge is that, um, community-based is important, but farm-based housing is important too, right? It's the area with the greatest concern, the greatest need. And so I think that may be one reason it is so discussed is because we know people and developers like make very good housing, right? And that, you have all these additional layers of compliance because you're just getting so many kind of funds. So yeah, I think for me, that's kind of and I'll maybe just talk about kind of myself, like for me, that's the balancing act, right? It's where's the greatest need you know, knowing full well, I don't have to worry about Meg. I don't have to worry about CASA going out there and building substandard housing. Yes, my apologies. My apologies. Yes. You help, yes, develop and expand communities. So that's for me always that balance, right? Is where's the greatest need, but also what is the long-term goal, right? And it is community, right? It is ideally home ownership. So yeah, okay. Let's see. What else? Lori, did you raise your hand again? Okay.
I guess I wanted to say, one is I just do want us to keep in mind that it's not just a matter of compliance with current standards, that there is a process that's going on right through OSHA to strengthen standards. And so I think the capital adjustments or the capital improvements for on-farm housing, my understanding would be connected with those strengthened standards. So just to not lose that piece of it. And so the other thing that I guess I just want to suggest is that maybe there could even be a smaller group that would do some work ahead of the meeting to kind of flesh out so that the time in the meeting could be focused in on kind of where those decisions need to be made, or where, you know, there's preferences or strategy, to kind of have as little time on just kind of educating ahead of time, just to make the most use of people's time. And I don't know if Lisa or Meg or, you know, somebody would be willing to be part of that group to help OHCS kind of shape that conversation.
Absolutely, because I think that it all works together, right? But sometimes when you're making a decision based on that highest priority that you're looking at right now, Tim, those decisions can affect how the community-based stuff works too. So, you know, it's not just this group, it's, you know, it is the rest of the OHCS group as well, because like I said, I mean, this funding for community-based projects, it cannot be standalone. It's a 50% credit that is sold at a discount. So you're getting an effective rate of about 33% of the total cost in the tax credit, in cash, the tax credits, right? So you have to have these other resources in order to build farm worker housing, at least community-based stuff. And when we're making decisions on compliance, when it's available, how that works, I mean, it's all impacting the ability for people who focus on farm worker housing, community-based farm worker housing, to actually compete, because it just gets rolled up into these larger projects that don't really focus on this population. That's not their primary concern. It's just housing people, which is important because we have a crisis and we understand that. And yet just housing people and not being aware of the things that affect their lives and what is going to impact their ability to live there comfortably is important too. So I think it is a bigger conversation. I'm more than happy to participate however I can.
Awesome, and I appreciate it. And I know, and Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong, I think, did Lou float the idea of having that Ag Labor Housing Task Force be like an ongoing thing? I feel like he maybe briefly touched on it during the last meeting, and maybe I think Lisa and Meg, you might have been there, just because of, like you talked about, the complexity, right? Okay, we're the funders of these projects, but if we put out additional rules and compliance, are other agencies going to follow, and how are we all kind of connected in that goal? And I think, you know, while we obviously have some other state agencies here, you know, we don't have all the agencies that touch ag labor housing or community-based housing here, you know, and I think that is something that the pull of a governor's task force does have, and it does have that kind of mandate to go out and seek those solutions, you know, kind of interagency in combination with kind of external stakeholders. So yeah. You know, I think I talk about it plenty, you know, my overall ignorance on a lot of, you know, the programmatic side, right? I'm not a finance person. It may come as a shock. I am a people person. So, yeah, you know, and I appreciate all three of you. I think it was Lori, Lisa, and Meg, willing to kind of help further that discussion and kind of fill in my own gaps, my vast gaps in my knowledge. So yeah, maybe I think we've got at least potentially 2 smaller kind of settings, kind of hyper-focused meetings we need to be having in the near future. So I think maybe look for some survey polls, some to figure out some time we can meet in the next week or 2, or maybe 2 or 3 weeks is probably what we would need. So awesome. What else? What else do we have?
The housing study.
Oh, yes. Okay, yes. So at this time, right now, we have been approved for funding. We are going back to all of the ag workers to get their final input on the draft. And we have also, we're getting the document translated into Spanish. So I don't know when that will be done. But we also did just, I believe they've already started going out and reconnecting. I saw an email about it, I think last week. But yes, we need to do the study or the sub work group. So, okay, we'll add that to more stuff that needs to get done. But I did present the high level findings and recommendations at one of the initial ag labor housing meetings. Just kind of talking about, you've all had access, like the first 20 pages, basically, what are the demographics, where are the needs, what do the workers want, how many are in poverty, what their levels of education were, what are the barriers they see to housing on the community versus on farm, and this is one of those things where, you know, we could make recommendations from that. I know one of the pieces that they struggled with was farm workers getting into apartments, lacking documentation or not having the credit or the finances. And so stuff like, OHCS vouchers, pushing OHCS vouchers to help house these farm workers. But yes, anyways, I'm getting sidetracked. Yes, Lori, we need to do the work group. So I think I have the list of everyone who did it last time. I might just send out that survey again. Yeah. Is that what you wanted to talk about, Lori? Was that work, like the recommendations work group for it?
Yeah, just wanting it to move forward so
Yes.
that it can be public.
Okay, yes. So I think before the public piece, they want to do this final translation and go back to the farmers. So that's kind of where we're at with that. And I can circle back and try and see if there's a timeline. But okay, I'll follow up on that see if I can't get a specific when do we expect this to be done. But that's kind of where we're at with the process. We've gotten approval for the additional funding, approval for the translation, and now it's kind of back into the hands of the consultant. And they're the individuals they're working with. So we are at that point. And that was kind of what was holding it up. Just so to let you kind of peer into the kind of bureaucracy that is state government. We had to, because it was like an additional ask of funds, because it wasn't within the original scope of the contract, we had to go through like kind of an expedited funding process. So they could go do that additional and re-engagement and translation work. So that was what was holding it up. It wasn't, there wasn't anything else to it. It's just kind of.
Is OHCS considering whether or not like the OHCS vouchers would be part of this ask?
So I think that's for the capital investments.
Mm-hmm.
So absolutely, I think that's very much on the table, right? And so, there are a number of community-based recommendations for that. So certainly those are the ones that I'm going to be discussing. And as I've mentioned before, the idea is we would have a work group specifically around this funding. and those like vouchers could be very much something we pursue, right? Or maybe we help subsidize rent, right, for workers, or have some sort of set aside. When I told you like this is kind of like, don't put limits on what you think of as far as like capital investments. Like this is it, right? It's, do we want to push vouchers? Do we want to help subsidize rent for farm workers? Um, so that's the sort of stuff we should all be thinking about. So what I would, if I was all of you, I would go back and reread the first 20-ish pages of the study, which has all those high level recommendations and findings, and start saying, hey, Tim, what about, this voucher? Or what about, encouraging developers, or putting together a fund to develop more duplexes or triplexes, stuff like that. Yes, I can resend the study. I'll resend it out to everyone who's on this. I think I can. I sent it out already, right? I think, okay. If you've already gotten it before, then I can't get in trouble with sharing it again. So yes, I will resend it out to everyone on this call. But like I said, this is that opportunity. So like, I don't want people feeling boxed in. I don't want you feeling like, well, this is the way it's been going, you know, so is this how it's going to continue to go? That's very much not the case. Obviously I'm very much soft power. I have no budget. I don't have any sway over the governor or over this task force. But, when these recommendations come from myself or OHCS staff or developers, growers, or advocates, the more people who are pushing those kinds of recommendations, the more the increased chance we have of success, right? And having that impact. So yeah, let me go reread the study. I'll send it out again to everyone, but yeah, like that's the sort of stuff we should be thinking about. Don't think about this as just putting money into the hands of the growers or just putting money into the hands of the developers, but how can we help kind of that down the line individual impact, whether it's housing vouchers or whatnot. So yeah. What else do we got? Is there anything other pressing issues that people want to discuss? Knowing full well that we're going to be having some more maybe hyper specified engagements over the next few weeks. I think we've still technically got 25 minutes during this meeting, so I can kind of open it up to people if they want. Or we can give people some time back. It's kind of, I'll put it in all of your hands. Meg, you're shaking your hand like you want some time back.
Hey, yeah, I'm always trying to do more readings, because this is exactly the time that we need sometimes to just slow down, get to those studies, get some information. Sometimes there is no time for it. Yeah, and again, I want to make sure, Tim, that I'm not feeling that you're putting us aside. It's just, I think, the grower situation is a topic that we need to discuss. But if we can balance this meeting and bringing other people to, like we're gonna bring Natasha to explain more. Okay, what is the situation in here? I think we will be more clear in, what are the next steps, where are we putting in that letter that you are urging us to think about in October and November.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. So I think that can be the purpose of the next few small meetings, is to get that, okay, we've had the discussion. Tim has had these kind of broad kind of topics of conversation, but let's get into it and talk about, like, what does this actually look like, right? What are 5 recommendations that we want to make or push or pursue or better understand? So yeah, that's totally fair. So okay, we'll do that. Like I said, we'll have a couple very specific kind of engagements around compliance, as well as the funding, capital investment piece. So yeah, and again, I think there might be one grower or one maybe on this call. You know, very much I want you know, all kinds of input around this stuff. That's how we get be successful. So, okay. Well, are there you know, are there any other things that people want to discuss in this meeting uh, before I let you all go and you get a bunch of emails from me asking for more meeting times and dates? Okay. Hearing and seeing none, I will grant you all back the blessing of 22 minutes of extra time. And it's time on your calendar in which your boss thinks you're going to be doing something, but you can go out and get a coffee or a donut. Just don't let your boss see you. And if you're the boss, well, more power to you. So thank you again, everyone, for attending. I'm going to resend the study out in the next few minutes. Then look for that um, Survey Monkey around specific meetings. Martin and I will get Natasha there and we can kind of have further discussions, maybe even Martin or Mitch Hanush. And yeah, again, as always, I appreciate you all taking your time and effort. I know sometimes this can feel like a endless bureaucratic cycle of discussion, uh, but there is a finish. There is a finish line. We're going to run through the tape. We're going to get some really good recommendations shaped by all of you. And the you know, the growers, the advocates, the developers, non and for profit. And you know, at the end of the day, we are going to improve the housing and living conditions of our farm workers here in Oregon, thanks to all of your hard work and all the state agencies like Sarah. Thank you. So, all right, I will talk to you all later. Enjoy the rest of your day. Try and stay cool because it's very hot. And yeah, goodbye, everyone.
Thank you all.
Yeah.